Between now and 5 here on BBC Radio Leicester.
BBC Radio Leicester.
But first, it's time to turn to our attention to something that we do occasionally. We call it sort of our shorthand is a difficult conversation. It's not really. It's just conversations that perhaps people don't have. This year alone, we've spoken about things like end of life, power of attorney, Alzheimer's. But today, I wanted to open a discussion about ADHD and specifically, and the menopause. Because one woman from Leicestershire thinks that women are essentially going undiagnosed with ADHD. Then when menopause comes, things spiral out of control. Fiona Burton is a counsellor and hypnotherapist and joins us now. Fiona, it's lovely to have you in the studio.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for having me.
You know a lot about this, don't you? Why?
Well, from my own personal experience, I was diagnosed just over 2 years ago, around the time that I was starting to have perimenopause symptoms. And it's opened up a whole interest in me because there are so many women who go through life not getting diagnosed with ADHD anyway, and there's so many other conditions that kind of evolve from that, like depression, compulsive eating, drinking, anxiety, because they have had that undiagnosed and therefore untreated and unmanaged. But what can happen, what's happening now is with the greater awareness of, and thankfully people like Davina McCall on the TV talking about menopause, more people are recognising symptoms of the perimenopause, which is obviously what happens before you reach full menopause. But for many women, what's happening is undiagnosed ADHD, where they've maybe had the condition all their lives, but have managed to cope with it reasonably well. When they hit menopause and they have the symptoms, the drop in estrogen just causes all the wheels to fall off, and they just suddenly, they may be having periods of burnout where they just cannot cope with the extreme tiredness, the forgetfulness. We have heard of women who think they have early dementia. They think they're going mad. They maybe have to leave careers, relationships break down. And it really is very disempowering, very frightening and debilitating, when actually both of those conditions can be treated, can be managed, and that women should be able to still lead a very, very full life and still be able to flourish and feel that they have something to offer, even though they might have one or both of those conditions going on.
Seems to me it's really important that we spend some time on that. There's no reason why a woman listening to this now, and there will be women listening to this now, who have never thought that they may have ADHD, who may be entering into menopause, and suddenly they'll be listening to this now, and things will start to click. You work in the sphere we're talking about, and you were only diagnosed 2 years ago. You've lived your entire life quite happily.
Yes.
What prompted you to go through that process of diagnosis?
So going through life quite happily, probably quite maybe naively or with some ignorance of, and as we were talking earlier on before we came on air about ADHD, it's not in relation to, it's not a measure of your intellect, your intelligence. However, and I'm sure if you spoke to anyone with ADHD, they would agree with this, that you still have this underlying feeling of something's not quite right, or my brain doesn't work in the way that other people's brains work. And it feels like you have to put in more effort, or you have to be so much more hyper vigilant about not making mistakes, not forgetting things, completing tasks, doing boring, laborious things like filling in forms. And you just have this sense of, maybe I just need to try harder, or just focus, or just, maybe I'm lazy, maybe. And so there's this drip over the years of self-doubt, reproach and self-loathing of what's wrong with me, and you can't put your finger on it. So actually, then having had treatment and going on HRT and noticing a difference in my symptoms, it really helped. But there was still this underlying feeling of there's still something I'm missing. Now, to add into the mix, what can happen is when women have gone through decades of coping and managing, the estrogen drops, their energy levels drop. And those estrogen levels dropping have such an impact on so many of so much of the chemistry in our bodies. The dopamine, which is what's not working properly in ADHD. Because the estrogen drops, it affects our serotonin levels. It affects, again, the dopamine. So I still had that feeling of there's something not quite right. Now, to add into the mix, if you've had years of untreated, unmanaged or unhealed trauma, which most humans have, let's face it, on some level or another, it can almost be like a volcano exploding. If you have all those things come into the mix, all of a sudden you just feel like you're going crazy. And it's the despair and despondency that comes on people that can be very disempowering when all three are thrown into the mix.
So you outline a situation where I suspect that, as I say, people will perhaps recognise and maybe prompt them to go down a sort of a pathway to get some kind of diagnosis. Once you had been diagnosed and were receiving treatment, what did that feel like?
My goodness, there were so many emotions, but the biggest one of all was relief. And that feeling of, oh my goodness, it's not my fault. That was the biggest thing. And the amount of self-compassion that I started to have really grew. And that affects so much, because then you can then talk to yourself differently. You can start to research the condition, find out what would benefit you. And like anything, if we find out that we are dealing with something that we didn't know about, it's so important to get the information, do the research, ask for help, because there is so much help out there. And I think whether it's one or all three, so ADHD, menopause, trauma, definitely having a holistic approach. So that's what I'm trying to do to help people is I do hypnotherapy, which can really help relieve the symptoms of the hot flushes, the concentration, focus. With menopause, hypnotherapy can really help with, again, focus, and also just a lot of anxiety that can be induced because you don't know what's going wrong. That can't be underestimated.
You're changing people's lives, aren't you? Fundamentally.
Well, yes. Actually, yes, because if you are in your late 40s or 50s or maybe a bit older and think, do you know what, that's it, I'm on the scrap heap, I just have to give up my job. Or you think you're going crazy and you think you've got dementia, and the amount of anxiety that can induce and the feelings of hopelessness and despair, to then understand, wait a minute, it is this and it could be a bit of that, and actually there's help out there for you. And to reduce the trauma as well, because some people just keep going with ADHD. But
you would do, wouldn't you? Because if you'd never known anything different,
yes,
other than that, as you describe, that sort of nagging, my brain doesn't seem to work like my friends or my family works, but it doesn't matter. Keep, one foot in front of the other, head down, keep going.
Yes.
One of the amazing things about radio is that people will be listening to this now going, well, hang on a minute, that's me. What was the switch for you, though? I mean, I love the fact that you've worked in this. You've probably diagnosed people with ADHD and it didn't occur to you that you had got it. So, yes, I'm not in a position to diagnose, certainly not. Before I was even started working as a counsellor, I actually ran a service for parents, offering some emotional support to parents who had children with special needs. Now, a lot of those parents had children with autism, ADHD, a mixture of both, lots of other neurodiverse conditions. However, I would never in a million years thought that I fell into that category. So the switch for me was that light bulb moment of recognising, doing an online self-assessment, because some things that a colleague had put on social media about women with ADHD, I just thought, tick, 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 that's me, I'm forgetful. I have so many tabs open in my brain at once. I want to do like 10 different careers and try different hobbies and never finish them, and all these different things that made me just think, that's me. And it was such a affirming and reassuring and such a moment, but also a relief. But you do also go through a bit of a grieving process because of especially midlife, because you think of all the lost opportunities and all that time where you maybe didn't try things or do things or gave up because you thought, oh, I can't do it, I'm not good enough. So having that help is really life-changing, because
to have some therapy, for trauma that's not been treated. And everyone should have that, aside from whether you've got ADHD or going through menopause. Everyone should not go through life with decades and decades of unhealed trauma, because it's so unhealthy. But, there are so many things that can help, and it's not just a one strand. So yes, there's medication. You have HRT for perimenopause symptoms. That's great. It's one strand. It might not be suitable for everyone. You can have medication for ADHD, either stimulant type or non-stimulant. But again, that's one strand. There's so much more to changing your lifestyle choices, changing the way you think, the way you react to stress, and these can all be done through the coaching, therapy, hypnotherapy type ways.
Sorry to interrupt. I know that you're passionate about sort of getting the message out there and enabling people to do some research themselves, to find a route, go to the GP, go to a therapist, all that kind of thing. What would encapsulate it in a sentence? What would your message be to somebody listening now who's thinking, maybe I need to look into this?
Oh, please. Just don't give up. Go and keep seeking and asking and speaking to people till you get the answers that you need. But just don't give up.
Fiona, it's lovely to have you in the studio. Let's talk more about it in the future. Let's keep the dialogue going, because I think it's worth doing, isn't it? The more we talk about it, the more people will listen. I think it's amazing.
Yes.
Fiona, thank you so much for coming in and joining us. Thank you. And if people want your details, how will they find you online?
So I am New Insight Therapy. .co.uk, and also on Facebook, New Insight Therapy, and I will be sharing a lot of resources about this topic on there today.
Okay, fabulous. Thanks for joining us. Thank you. See you again soon. Look, it's 4:20. You're listening to BBC Radio Leicester. We'll do some weather for you in a second.